Again and Again, Why Repetition is So Important in Reading and Writing by Barb Miller. Humans love repetition. It helps us to learn and to make sense of the world. When something happens more than once, we know it's important and common. Think about how a baby learns everything. It's simply by experiencing it again and again. Repetition is seen in many ways outside of literature. For example, in decorating, you might have gone into your grandma's kitchen and seen that she has roosters all over it. That would be a motif. Music uses refrains, that parts of the music that repeat again and again and that we can remember easily. In nature, we see repetition. For example, we see the repetition of petals on a flower. Even in fashion, we see fabrics that have designs that repeat and clothing styles that are popular with slight variations from season to season. So what is repetition in literature? Well, it's using the same word, phrase, idea, or motif again and again for emphasis. Here's the important thing about repetition. If the writer repeats something, it's important. Of course, too much exact repetition, and you know what happens. It can be a bad thing. Like in this cartoon where the dad is yelling at the kid, "If I have to tell you one more time again and again," that becomes nagging. And most of us tend to tune out nagging. So when is repetition bad? Well, when you're writing, if it's written in the exact same way, it's easily ignored by the reader. So the trick is to repeat it in somewhat different ways. When can repetition be good? Well, when it's funny, when it's used as parallel structure, it will make sense in our brains. When it's used in different forms or in different places, it can be good. And it can also be good when it has a surprising outcome. Let's take a look at these in examples. So here's an example of repetition being funny. This comes from The Everlasting Story of Nora by Nicholson Baker. Nori was a Catholic because her mother was a Catholic. And Nori's mother was a Catholic because her father was a Catholic. And her father was a Catholic because his mother was a Catholic, or had been. So we see that idea of repetition over and over and over, and because we hear it so many times, it begins to be kind of amusing. Repetition can be used in the same part of a sentence. For example, where we have this at the very end of each section of the sentence, and that's a literary device called epistrophe. Hatred was spreading everywhere. Blood was being spilled everywhere. Wars were breaking out everywhere. And that's from Deep River by Shizaku Endo. So we really get the emphasis there that everywhere this is taking place, and we don't get bored or tired by that because the beginning of each of those sentences is slightly different. So we have a lot of emphasis there. Repetition can also be pulled off by using different forms of the word, and here's an example of using different parts of speech. This is from Joshua Ferris's Then We Came to the End. Almost nothing was more annoying than having our wasted time wasted on something not worth wasting it on. So here Ferris has used that word wasted in a variety of parts of speech, and again, it keeps us thinking and keeps us engaged, and we get that sense of waste there by it being repeated in different ways and different forms. Finally, writers can use a little bit of irony, some kind of a surprise outcome that will engage us as well. Here's an example of opposites. This is from Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Half of a Yellow Sun. There are some things that are so unforgivable that they make other things easily forgivable. So we have that juxtaposition of unforgivable and forgivable, those two things in the same sentence, those two opposites that make us hone in on this idea of what is forgivable and what is not. So repetition can be used by writers to develop characters. When we see that their behavior has some ways that it shows the same kind of characteristics and traits over and over again, when they talk in the same way over and over again, or they have specific traits that are shown again and again. Repetition can also develop conflict. when repeated conflicts occur that are of similar type or involve similar situations. And finally, when there are certain events that teach characters lessons or teach readers lessons, that can help, the repetition can help develop a theme. So in short, repetition is super important. When you're reading, be watching for it again and again and again. And when you feel that you've seen this kind of scenario before, you've heard this before from a character, pay attention because it means something important. The writer is trying to stress something to get across this idea of characterization or conflict or probably theme. So be on the lookout for repetition of words, of phrases, of ideas, of motifs. Find them and draw your own conclusion. That's all for now.